We are actively working with all Security Council members and the wider UN membership to find solutions for peace in the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Somalia remains deeply concerned by the continued suffering of the Palestinian people. The ongoing violence, displacement, and deprivation faced in the occupied territories, including Gaza, demand our collective conscience and urgent action. We call for an immediate and lasting ceasefire, unhindered humanitarian access, and renewed commitment towards the two-state solution as the only viable path for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East today.
What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity that is both documented and monitored, and it will be recorded in history books and the pages of international conscience as one of the most horrific chapters of humanitarian tragedy in the 20th and 21st centuries. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Palestine, the extremist Israeli government continues to implement its settlement policies through illegal settlement expansion and developing projects for annexing settlements. The latest was the construction plan for E1, which would divide the West Bank into two parts and would isolate occupied Jerusalem from its surroundings and would undermine the option of the two-state solution in a blatant violation of international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, specifically Resolution 2334. Furthermore, the Israeli Prime Minister announced a plan for what he calls Greater Israel, which we reject and completely deplore, and which involves expanding into sovereign Arab states. In addition to the brutal attack against the sisterly state of Qatar, which we condemn.
And today, after all these years have passed, we pose to you the same fateful question from the Yemeni people, whether these values and principles continue to exist or not, or else what would it mean for our country to be left hostage to the Iranian regime's expansionist schemes and its militias that use hunger as a weapon, religion as a tool, and maritime passages as a means of blackmail? What does it mean for this country with an ancient history to become one of the most dangerous hotspots of terrorism, cross-border terrorism in the world? Therefore, we are here today not simply to speak of the epic confrontation of the Yemeni people against the most violent and arrogant of terrorist organizations at all. Rather, we are here to build on what was achieved and to call on the world once again to take action and not simply to take note, and to achieve the salvation that we have promised our people, not simply a repetition of statements of the past.
It's important to say this. Haiti is experiencing war, a war between criminals that want to impose violence as their social order and a population, an unarmed population that is fighting for human dignity and freedom. The response must be firm and determined. Today, the international community must stand alongside Haiti and take large-scale measures, not half steps. A strong, coordinated, and immediate action is needed.
The world is at war. Defense spending is at an all-time high, approaching $3 trillion annually. We have many problems. And now more than ever, we need to come together. We are also at war. Our shores are being invaded by seawater. Our homes are being blown away by storms. Our roads are being washed away by torrential rains. Our reefs are overheating. Our fish are disappearing. And our land is on fire. This is our daily battle. And ahead of COP30 in Belém, we must see new nationally determined contributions submitted without delay, particularly from major emitters. And they must be aligned with the 1.5-degree trajectory.
Ladies and gentlemen, for many years, I spoke from this tribune about tragedies of aggression, occupation, and injustice experienced by Azerbaijan. Today, I will speak about our long road to victory and peace, and a new era in Azerbaijan's history, about how we managed to end the occupation through a liberation war and how we won peace by political means. For nearly 3 decades, almost 20% of Azerbaijan's sovereign territory remained under military occupation by Armenia. 1 million of Azerbaijanis were expelled from their homes as a result of the policy of ethnic cleansing and war crimes conducted by Armenia. Their fundamental human rights were grossly violated. 4 United Nations Security Council resolutions adopted in 1993 demanded immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of Armenian armed forces from the occupied territories. Sadly, these resolutions were never implemented. Armenia demonstratively ignored them because no sanctions were imposed on it by the international community. The OSCE Minsk Group, established in 1992 to facilitate a settlement, has failed in its mission. Instead of enforcing the norms and principles of international law, its co-chairs sought to preserve the status quo and keep the conflict frozen. In 2020, after almost 30 years of ineffective negotiations, Azerbaijan was forced to exercise its legitimate right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. During the war, Armenia shelled our towns and cities with ballistic missiles and cluster munitions, killing more than 100 of innocent civilians. Azerbaijan, in its turn, conducted the war in strict compliance with international humanitarian law. We ensured protection of civilians and refrained from targeting non-military infrastructure. In 44-day patriotic war, our armed forces liberated occupied territories and restored Azerbaijan's territorial integrity in accordance with international law and relevant UN Security Council resolutions. The 10 November 2020 marked the capitulation of Armenia and restoration of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity after nearly 30 years of occupation. Right after our victorious war, Azerbaijan declared its readiness to open a new page in relations with Armenia, based on mutual recognition of territorial integrity and sovereignty. We proposed 5 basic principles rooted in international law. We tabled the proposal for a peace treaty. Then we initiated a negotiation process on its draft text, which lasted from October 2022 to summer 2025. Despite several attempts to derail the process, the negotiations produced positive results as they were conducted on a strict bilateral basis, free from any kind of external interference. On August 8 this year, the foreign ministers of Azerbaijan and Armenia in Washington, in the White House, in presence of the leaders of the United States, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, initialed the text of peace agreement. The same day, the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia signed the joint declaration. President of the United States, Donald Trump, also signed it as a witness.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today representing the will of a people that is still holding on to hope, still believing in its ability to build a stable and prosperous future. Libya is not a zone for fighting. It's not an arena to settle scores. or a place to which crises can be exported. It is a nation rich in natural resources, a cohesive society, with young people that have tremendous potential. They are the backbone to build a modern state.
We are and will remain a steadfast defender of multilateralism, of the rules international-based order, and of the United Nations Charter. The alternative to this international rules-based order is a chaotic and violent world. As seen in Sudan, an unreported and devastating conflict with destruction of huge proportions, as seen in Gaza, as seen in Ukraine. In Gaza, where we witness an unimaginable suffering, children starving, families shattered, a humanitarian catastrophe that shocks the world's conscience. The use of starvation as a weapon of war is immoral and one that defies words. The European Union condemns terrorism in all its forms. The horrific attacks by Hamas cannot be forgotten. And we stand with Israel's right to security. Every country, every people have the right to live in security. The hostage must be released immediately. The Palestinian people have also the same right to security and to live in a viable state.
A present in which we in the United Kingdom do not stand up for one nation's rights whilst ignoring others, but act resolutely with the Charter as our compass. This is why I want to address directly the Israeli-Palestinian tragedy. What is happening in Gaza is indefensible. It is inhumane. It is utterly unjustifiable, and it must end now. The people of Palestine, whose state we proudly recognize this week, and the people of Israel deserve better than the horrific acts by Hamas on October the 7th that left children without their parents and parents without their children. Better than the torment of families waiting desperately for the return of their loved ones from the most barbaric captivity. Better than the fanatical rule by Hamas, a vile, pitiless terrorist organization that must have no future in Gaza. Better than Israel's denial of life-saving humanitarian aid and the catastrophic famine that it has caused. As Israel escalates its military operations and displaces Palestinian families again and again and again, there can be no answer to these horrors but concerted diplomatic action to keep the hope of peace alive. As we work with leaders from across the region and beyond in support of the US's efforts to build a consensus around a durable plan for peace.
I believe that the most powerful and most important promise leaders can make is to do everything in their power to ensure that our future is at least a little better than the present. Yet today we cannot close our eyes to the gap between this aspiration and the harsh reality we live in. For example, in Gaza, where devastation, starvation, and despair have reached terrible proportions. For Austria, it is clear the attacks of Hamas on Israel on October 7th were horrible and beyond imaginable brutality. They must be condemned by all of us. We have said it from day one and will continue to do so. Hamas must immediately and unconditionally free all hostages, end its rule in Gaza, and hand over its weapons. At the same time, nothing justifies the devastating humanitarian catastrophe we are witnessing in Gaza. Civilians must be protected at all times. There is no justification for violating international law, including international humanitarian law.
Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is a blatant violation of the very foundation of this organization. A permanent member of the Security Council has brutally invaded another UN member state. This cannot be tolerated. Holding Russia accountable is essential for all of us to deter further aggression and to preserve the global order. From the very outset, Ukraine has sought a just and lasting peace based on international law, including the UN Charter. Sweden remains unwavering in its support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Mr. President, on October 7, 2023, Hamas carried out the worst mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. Men, women, and children were brutally murdered and kidnapped by Hamas terrorists. And when the music faded at the Nova Festival, so did the lives of young, peace-loving people. They were raped, killed, and taken hostage. It was truly a painful reminder of how dark the world can be. The hostages are being held in appalling conditions by Hamas. More pressure must be put on Hamas to immediately release them, and Hamas must never have a place in the future governance of Palestine. The war in Gaza has led to suffering beyond imagination. We are reminded daily of the painful desperation inside Gaza. The offensive against Gaza City is worsening an already catastrophic situation. Parts of Gaza are now officially in the grips of famine. This cannot go on. Israel has a right to defend itself, but that right must be exercised in accordance with international law. And the way the Israeli government is waging its war is unacceptable.